What's up, everybody? Welcome to Geared Up. This is our weekly live broadcast where we talk about lighting techniques, gear, really, that's it, photography stuff. Mostly pertaining to lighting, because obviously we're the light shipping company. Today, I'm pretty excited. I'm sure you're pretty excited too. We have Patrick Hall back with us for the second go-round from Fstoppers. I'm going to bring him in right now. Hey, buddy.
How's it going?
So, yesterday on the Fstoppers YouTube channel, they released part one. I'm going to throw up a little QR code so you can scan it. I'll also throw a link in the comment section to check out the first part of the 6 lighting setups for wedding photographers. Today we're going to be releasing part 2, the last 3 episodes. So how's it going, Patrick?
It's going well. I'm just down here in Puerto Rico, living the life and trying to navigate my way through a 9-month baby.
Yeah, it's always fun stuff. What do you think is the most important thing for someone? I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who are currently wedding photographers. Maybe there's some people who are thinking about getting into it. What are some of the most important things from a lighting perspective, information that you could give to, aspiring, or maybe a wedding photographer who's looking to add lighting to their setup?
So, one thing that's always in fashion is natural light. If you're a wedding photographer, natural light is kind of your live all. You need to learn how to use that really well. But that being said, wedding photography is also one of those genres where many times natural light's just not going to cut it. The most obvious is the reception hall. When everyone's dancing and partying, like, natural light is just not going to work for the most part. There's probably some situations where you can, bump the ISO and shoot at 1.4. But so I think the biggest thing for me was always to be proficient in both natural light, but then also know how to use strobe light for when you need it. And then when you get comfortable enough, you can kind of start adding the two together to create your signature look. And for me, that always relied a little bit more on flash photography. I like the way that it looks. I always found that natural light looked really beautiful, but then there wasn't quite enough light on my subject's face. And so I think the biggest thing is just being prepared for whatever is thrown your way. So if that is a rainy, overcast day, or you book that wedding where the time zones change and all of a sudden everything's happening after sunset, you got to be prepared to handle, any situation. And so I hope some of the lighting setups that we showed today allow you to understand what you can do, and maybe you find a lighting setup that's your favorite and it's your easiest. I want to preface all of this by saying, in no way would I use all 6 of these setups in and out of the wedding. Like, it's probably too much to do all of them. But find the one that you really like, and maybe that's, a softbox, and learn to use that as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that people have to remember whenever it comes to using lighting is that when you're at the level of being a professional, you have to be able to get results no matter what. And I know a lot of people, natural light's beautiful and it's easy to depend on it, but sometimes the elements just don't go your way. So being able to take control, and I think especially in some of the stuff you talk about in the 3 that we're going to talk about today, or that you're going to talk about today, there's some really good stuff you do in there in augmenting the natural light with flash to keep it looking natural, while also just kind of making it look a little more crisp than you would get. So.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's very easy to shoot natural light. It's super simple. It's quick. It's the simplest thing you can do. We're all used to seeing it. But as you'll see, maybe in this first lighting setup, sometimes when you get proficient enough and you feel comfortable enough, adding just a little bit of flash, especially to people's faces, can really add some contrast, some contour. It can really bring an image to life. And if you mix it maybe 80% natural light with 20% flash, I think, like, that's the sweet spot for me.
Do you think we should just go ahead and dive into the video, or do you want to talk about the first part of the video, the stuff that you released on your YouTube page yesterday? Should we talk
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that?
we could. Let's talk about the first three real quick so people can kind of be caught up on where we started and three of the
Cool.
lighting setups that I probably use the most. So this image was shot with a 1x3 strip box. And what's nice about the strip box is you can light a full body a little bit easier. You know, if you get a softbox really close, like we like it, you get really nice light on the face, but sometimes everything from the torso down kind of falls off into shadow. And so with this particular shot that you're seeing right now on the screen, I put the strip box really close and kind of did like maybe a one light headshot kind of setup.
Mhm.
And this is really nice when you just need beautiful pictures of the bride or the groom, or maybe them even together, and you want soft light, but you want to shoot a 3/4 shot. Um, in many cases, I would use the strip box. That might be the only softbox I would bring to a wedding. It was just one that I enjoyed using a lot.
It's a really beautiful image. It's in and the strip box the highlight from the strip box is just perfect.
And I want to mention too, because I know this is really popular, especially with lighting images. None of these have been retouched. So a lot of times people like to dodge and burn everyone's face to get it to look really, really nice. This is straight out of the camera. Maybe I did a crop or something. So when you see the light hitting her, you should be able to have a realistic representation of what that light will look like if you did it out on the field.
Absolutely. So let's go. I believe this is another one from part one.
Yes. So sometimes, as I mentioned in the other video, you just need to create a little bit more dramatic lighting to make a scene or background look a little more exciting. We
Hmm.
were outside this castle, which has this incredible wall, but without showing the whole castle and the whole scene, sometimes the wall it just looks kind of like boring concrete. And
Hmm.
so I don't know if I've shared with you the natural light, but you can see that in the video.
Yeah.
Um, the natural light looks nice, but it just doesn't really add that punch. It doesn't have that crispiness. And I believe I used, what was this? This was the Click, um, drawing a blank. What's the
What the
Click
click
reflector
Fresnel?
dish?
Oh, the
No,
Magnum.
the reflector dish,
Click Magnum, maybe.
the Magnum. That's it.
Yeah.
The Magnum with the grid on it. I'm able to really narrow that beam of light, which creates kind
Mhm.
of a natural vignette. And I feel like this just makes her stand out from a scene that's, pretty flat if you saw the natural light image.
Yeah. Now let's see. We got this here.
And then this image is using the Fresnel off to the side. And what's nice about this, I've never used this light modifier. I think you guys just released this recently. It seems to add a little bit more power, which sometimes you need, especially in bright, sunny conditions. But it also allows you to have kind of a narrow beam just on her face. You can see the light falling off on her dress. Her legs aren't nearly as bright as her face. And, that light modifier might be used a little bit more in a studio setting,
Mhm.
but it's so small. I don't have it with me right here, but it's about the size of one of your grids or something.
Yeah. Sorry. This is actually an. Oh no. I'll knock the picture down here. Let's see. Yeah, it's
Do you
about this
have one?
size. This little thing
Yeah, I
right
mean
here.
that's so small, and to add, I don't know, you're the technician. It adds a stop or two of light. To have something so small like that in your bag, it's a no-brainer to have that with you at all times. In the event that you're needing that one extra stop of light and you don't have a larger strobe, pop that thing on, and you still get the hard light, but you can narrow the beam down a little bit smaller without having a larger magnum
Exactly.
or some kind
I
of
was going to say.
reflector dish.
I was going to say the same thing. The nice thing about the narrow beam, the nice thing about the Magnum is you're going to get a little bit wider spread, but it takes up more space. So if you need to keep it super compact and you need the light output, it's 1.7 stops more out. Um, that Fresnel's a great little modifier. So for the images that we just showed you, you can click the Fresnel up in the corner or you can click the Fresnel up in the corner. You can click the QR code up in the corner and you can actually go to the Fstoppers YouTube, or you can just go to the Fstoppers YouTube page and you can actually watch part one and see Patrick break down, or see actually Patrick create all those images and learn why he made the choices that he made with his light shaping tools. With that being said, we are going to now jump into part two. So we're going to make between each one of the setups, we're going to have a small pause. So if anyone has any questions about the setups, we can talk about them. So with that being said, let's fire this up.
All right, so now I want to show you how you can use a little pop of flash to improve your natural light. We have this beautiful soft light hitting the wall very evenly. Everyone's going to look good in this because the light is so soft. Let me go ahead and show you what this looks like with just natural light. I'm going to do these vertically, and my thought is if I can do 3 shots and put them next to each other, it'll be kind of a cool 3-shot panel. As you can see here, the light looks really good. Sometimes you might have issues with soft light where the dress is starting to blow out a little early because you're trying to get the exposure perfect, and white always blows out the quickest. So I think these shots look great just with natural light, but if you want to add just a little finesse and add a little bit of directionality but still maintain some soft light, this next tip is definitely one you're going to want to master. So off to the side here, what we have is the 2-foot white beauty dish. I've removed the soft baffle just so that I can get a little harder light, and because we're outside, sometimes to overpower the natural light, you want to take that baffle off. I'm gonna have Jean put the light, let's go ahead and put it right off to the side. The goal is to have it again kind of 45 degrees just off from her nose so that it's casting light down, but then we have all this soft light that you can see hitting me coming in and kind of acting as the fill. So to prepare this shot for my flash, I'm gonna go ahead and lower the exposure just a little bit, maybe 2/3 of a stop from where we were with the natural light. Let me go ahead and show you what that looks like here. So as you can see, this shot is just slightly underexposed, but that's what we want because now we're gonna fill in our scene with our beauty dish. So because the beauty dish has this panel in front that blocks a lot of the light and it kind of lets the whole dish fill with light, I have to bump up my exposure a little bit more than I might with a softbox. So I'm gonna set this at level 7, even though the light is relatively close to our subject. And now if I take a shot, you can just see there's now some soft shadows coming under her nose, under her chin. All of her dress has a lot more shape to it. It really brings the detail in the dress out, which is always important at a wedding. So we still have some detail in the shadows where we want it, but we're able to add that directionality, which I think improves the image significantly. Now, you could do this with any of the softbox options. I just chose the beauty dish because I think it's a little edgier, and I do like how small this is. You can pack this in a bag. And so in many cases, I'd actually travel with this collapsible beauty dish over some of the larger softboxes.
Well, this is a little, okay, apologies. That took me like way too long to click unmute button. Sorry about that, Patrick.
Oh, no worries.
So please ask any questions that you have about that. Again, one of the things that I really love about that setup is natural light's really beautiful and you can do a lot of great stuff with it, but I just feel like if you can add just a little bit of directionality, the flashes, if you just kiss it into the image, it can add like a polish to your image that natural light just doesn't have.
Exactly. And you know, one of the biggest requests that I got as a wedding photographer shooting weddings for over 10 years is always, one of the common ones is, can you make my face brighter? And sometimes you would say, well, the exposure is correct. You're in natural light. Like that's how it looks, you know, if you were there. But people always want their face a little bit brighter, or they want it to be filled in a little bit, or, you know, I think what I'm really showing that I didn't mention in the video is you're adding this specular highlight, this little bit of just like the highest highlights are being pulled out of the face. And there's probably situations now with Lightroom where you can go in and start kind of replicating flash through post-production. But with wedding photography, you don't have time to do that. You don't want to start going through and start bringing up the shadows on people's faces. And so if you can do that little bit of light on location with soft light like I just showed, I think that's definitely the way to go.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point too, especially for people who are thinking about getting into wedding photography. The sheer volume of images that you're dealing with on a wedding in particular, you don't have time. Or I mean, if you take the time to go in and fix every single one of those images, like your return on investment is like terrible. So it's just one of those things where, you know, understanding the value in knowing how to light, knowing how to get the image right there in your camera is going to save you so much time on the back end.
Another thing too that is one of these qualities that you don't really understand until you do it enough times is there is something about having an assistant with a light at your shoot that makes brides or anybody, any commercial client, they feel like the production is larger and they feel like you care a little bit more. And so it adds this value where they think, well, I've been to weddings where there was no photographer who had lighting. And so they kind of feel like they're getting more of a value. And then the other thing is you can show people the back of the camera and the image looks the way that you're going to deliver it, 90% of the way. Whereas if you show some natural, I mean, how many times have you done this? You show a natural light shot and you have to tell them, now imagine if I pull the background down a little bit and brighten you up, like this is going to look sick when I get done with it.
Yeah.
When you add lighting and you get it all done in camera, it's just so much easier. The expectation's there. You know what you're capable of doing. You can show it to them right then and there. Especially when you start adding gels and doing a little bit more finesse and um, stylized lighting, it's
Hmm.
just easier to show them and say, like, look at that sunset. Like, it doesn't look like that right now, but with the lighting, the way we just did it, this shot looks sick. And then they jump into the reception. They feel like their wedding photographer has done an incredible job. They have all the confidence in you. And, I feel like that's value that people don't always understand with lighting on location.
I think it's really interesting too. I've never thought about having, because you always think about production value on stuff like that. Because again, especially in the wedding industry, making your clients feel special, especially on their special day, is incredibly important. I've never thought about an assistant as something that adds production value. You always think about gear and stuff like that, but that makes a ton of sense. Like it's like this one person that's hyper focused on this one thing that just helps. One, you don't have to worry about your light stand falling over if you're using big modifiers, and you can put it wherever you want to very, very quickly while staying where you are. But yeah, that's actually an interesting idea. I really like that.
Yeah, I would never shoot a wedding without an assistant. And I call them assistants. Sometimes they're second shooters. They're really doing both. If the wedding is big enough, you're getting paid enough, and it's enough hours, and there's enough moving parts. You have to figure that out for yourself. I would hire two people. I would have somebody who I felt like I could leave at the rehearsal or the reception and getting pictures while I'm off with the bride and groom. But then I would also want that second person who's probably also a second shooter to just help me light so that I can get those awesome images. And the two of us would go out with the bride and groom or maybe the full wedding party. And it just allowed me to do whatever I needed to do. If I could shoot natural light, many times I would do that. But then if I want to produce some images that really have that pop, I have somebody there to help me move everything along. And as we just said, it adds production value. It just makes your couple feel like you're a professional and then you're capable of doing whatever you need.
Yeah. So Monzi Roland was asking, what kind of lighting diffusers do you recommend?
For me personally, my go-to was always a softbox. For years, I shot with a very small softbox. I don't know which pro photo would be equivalent to, but maybe like a foot by foot or 2 feet by 2 feet. I just like
Hmm.
that they're small. They still give some directionality. And then I, shot most of my weddings in Charleston near the beach. And the last thing I want is an umbrella or a huge octabox that's blowing around. Like I wanted it tight and compact. So I would recommend a softbox, whether that be a 3 foot octa, the 1x3 strip box. I love that too. It gives you the soft light, but then can also light a full body a little bit easier. Um, and then you have some other ones. I have some hanging up here. I have one right here, a 3x4. So there's a lot of choices. I would just say something that's manageable, something that's easy to put together, and all of them are going to diffuse the light pretty well. So it's just kind of a matter of what's easy to pack in your bag and then assemble out on location.
Yeah. Let's see. We have Omenka wants to know if it's wrong to use a diffuser to diffuse the light in this kind of shoot. Should you not be should you I guess be using a harder light?
You could do that too. I assume she's talking about the shoot we just saw.
Mhm.
It really depends on the look that you're going for. It also depends on how bright it is. The brighter the day and the more you're trying to overpower the ambient light, sometimes the diffuser is going to knock out a few stops of light. So if you want that punch of light and you just find that the diffuser is killing too much of the light because it's, you're shooting at noon and you're still trying to overpower it, maybe that's a good time to take the softbox off and use a hard light. And then the third thing, and it takes time to get used to this, but it's kind of, people's facial features. If you have a groom and his face is all broken out, using a soft light is going to help kind of tone down the acne. If you have a bride who's got, maybe I've shot older people and they have the double chin and everything, a soft light is going to help, with older skin. If you have somebody like the girl we used in this video, I mean, her skin's flawless. She's, young. She has chiseled features. I could have used a hard light and she would look amazing in it. So there is this element of hard light kind of exposes more with the clothing, more with the skin, more with the hair. Soft light is going to soften everything and be a little bit more subtle. So that's really kind of an artistic decision, but then also a decision on, what are you trying to hide and accentuate within, the person's face or their wardrobe.
Yeah, I think that's big. And then also intention. I I feel like a lot of people light kind of by the seat of their pants, where if you have an idea, and one, it's going to make your life way better in having some idea of the images you want to create because you know what to bring with you. You don't have to overpack stuff because this might not work, this might not work. I mean, it's always good to have a backup plan just in case, but I think you really have to think about what it is you're trying to achieve. And in this image, you were clearly trying to achieve a natural look with a little bit of finesse to it. And so by diffusing the light as opposed to overpowering the light or the natural light, you were able to achieve that. So it's really about what it is that you're looking to achieve. Again, especially in an environment like weddings, where you have a client who's hiring you for your look. So it's one of those things that you probably should develop your look and then deliver that because that's what they're hiring you for. So I think you have to also have an idea of what it is that you do and what you're doing and why
My
you're doing it.
go-to, again, is always soft light first and foremost, whether that be natural light or supplementing with a softbox. That was like always looks good. It's kind of like our good friend Peter Hurley. It's like everyone looks good in the super soft light,
Mhm.
always. Like that is something that you can use, and probably he uses 95% of the time. But if you can use hard light, sometimes that looks great, especially if you need to step further back and you
Mhm.
can't get a softbox close. I was just always scared for a long part of my career of using hard light of any sort. I was always told overcast days are your friend and you don't want to shoot in hard light and you don't and then I was scared to use hard light, so I would always use a softbox. Where now I feel like I understand hard light a little bit better. I actually kind of chase hard light. And
Mhm.
unfortunately in these videos we have this stuff called Sahara dust that kind of blocks out a lot of it's like this cloud cover that's, over the sun. So there was very little hard light to use on the examples that we're going to show today. But I actually kind of chase hard light and I try to put it behind them and then
Yeah.
maybe light them with the hard light from the front. But point is soft light is definitely your go-to friend for most wedding situations. And then you can kind of supplement it from there.
A couple more questions and then we'll roll the second part. Cooley wants to know, is there a size of light modifier that's kind of a do-it-all?
I mean, not really. I guess you could argue that if you had a huge 7-foot octabox, you could get that close and it would do one look, and then you could back it out really far and it would do a second look. But, not really. I feel like they all do little things slightly differently.
Mhm.
I really do like. I have over here off to the side the beauty dish. I like the beauty dish because you can put the reflector part in front of it and
Mhm.
get the beauty dish look, and then you can also put the diffuser on top of that. But then you could also pull off the reflector piece, leave the diffuser, and kind of have a softbox. And then you could also remove all of it and have a hard light. So I feel
Mhm.
like to me, the beauty dish is kind of the collapsible one
Yeah.
is kind of the most versatile. But no, unfortunately, they all do something a little bit different. So my
Yeah.
suggestion is get the softbox, maybe get a beauty dish, and then get some of these like hard light modifiers that allow you to use hard light as well. So with three kind of setups, you can pretty much do everything.
Yeah. I have a couple over here from our prophoto.com. So I can't post them up on the screen, so I'll just read them out loud. I think Laura was asking, how do you know which modifier to choose? I think we've covered that. And then someone was asking, locations in nature are sometimes characterized by overwhelming shades of green. colors that affect the skin tones, especially the bridal dress. Any tips on using flash, or which light shaping tool do you recommend? So like to avoid color cast from the environment.
I think, you know what? Let me answer that in 2 seconds because I think the next video deals with a little bit of that. I don't know if I completely come out and say it, but we have the bride in a shady area with a lot of trees above, and it's creating that magenta brown cast, but then also the green cast from the leaves. So if you
Gotcha.
want, we could play that video, and then I could talk about color casts because that's definitely something that's pretty
Perfect.
important to deal with.
I see we have one more question, then we'll roll it, and then let's do that. So let's see.
Okay.
This is Arsan. Do you improvise the look you want depending on the situation, or do you have some preset poses and lighting patterns?
I feel like with wedding photography, for me, it was all improvising everything. Like I would, this is some interesting stories. I would have the bride and groom, and they'd always say, "Have you shot at this plantation before?" And I'm like, "Oh, I've shot there like 50 times. I know that place really well. We can shoot here, shoot here, shoot here, shoot here." And then all of a sudden, you get out there the day of the wedding, and stuff falls behind, or they don't want to walk that far, or it's there's a hurricane coming, or it's overcast, or it's earlier in the day than you thought, and all of a sudden, all the places that you have scouted and so well, the lighting does not look the same at all there. And so for me, it's getting comfortable enough to where you feel like you can handle any situation. But then I would get somewhere and then we would pose them in a way that I've never posed them before and say, you know what, soft light's going to be the best thing to use here. Or, hey, we have these really nice light rays coming through. Maybe we can use some hard light from the front. So I definitely have lighting setups that I use all the time. Softbox, 45 degrees off to the side. Like it looks great every time. But for me, I found the more that I tried to plan for something like a wedding, the more times I would leave disappointed because what I planned to do never manifested.
Yeah.
And instead, I wound up doing something totally different. So I think with wedding photography and why it's so difficult and why you need to be such a good photographer is that you have to be able to adapt, you have to improvise, you have to be able to look at an image on the back of your screen and say, I know what this needs or what this doesn't need. And that takes a skill that a lot of studio photographers will never understand because you have all the time in the day and you have every tool at your disposal. Wedding photographer, definitely, you want to be quick on your feet and be able to adapt.
Cool. So let's roll the second one, see if we can answer the color cast question.
All right, so here we are in a really beautiful location, and you might have some kind of bench at a venue, and you're trying to mix up your poses by not having the bride stand every single time. This is definitely a picture-perfect scene. However, I don't know if you can see this in the camera, but up here we have a lot of foliage that's blocking the natural light. It's also introducing some green tint because the leaves are all green. And if I take the shot here with just natural light, you can see compositionally and the model, everything looks great, but the light is just kind of boring. So for this photo, I was thinking, why don't we light from a completely different angle than what we've done in the past? Let's put the light directly above, facing down. Let's go ahead and get our light, and let's just start with a bare bulb flash. All right, so we have our A2 here. I have Gene pointing the light from top down. Let's go ahead and take a shot here. And as you can see, it's super dramatic. It's almost like stage lighting. But if you zoom in and look at the shadows under Adiris's nose and cheeks, I mean, this is just not gonna be acceptable for most of your clients. It's not even acceptable here. So as you can see, hard light from this angle is not gonna work. But if we soften the light, I think we can get a really interesting usable image. It's about to start raining here, so let's go ahead and put on our 3-foot octabox and see how big of a difference this is gonna make. Once again, with the OCF2 adapter, we can just put all of these light modifiers on our strobes, no problem. I love that about this system. So now that we have the softbox attached, I'm just gonna go up 1 stop in power to account for the baffle. And now, as you can see, the light is a lot softer. If we zoom into her face, I mean, the shadows are there, but they're much more pleasing, and this shot just looks so natural. It doesn't scream flash photography. Now, if this angle is a little too dramatic for the couple that you're working with or the bride that you're shooting, let's have Gene just move the light forward just a little bit, keep coming. And just by having the light wrap around the front a little bit, it's gonna remove the shadows even more while still maintaining that directionality. And you know, I think actually this might be the perfect spot for the light. This looks great. It still gives this dimly lit vibe, but it lights our subject in a really beautiful way.
There, better, very cool. So I think one of the things that maybe I noticed in the shoot is the light's not getting a chance to bounce off of any of the greens and stuff like that above. So you're not really getting a cast from it. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. So if you're out in a forest or, you know, in Charleston, we had these amazing parks that I would always take people to because one, it's so hot. It's hot in Puerto Rico too, as you can see. As the shoot goes on, I'm drenched even more. So if you're a wedding photographer, be prepared for that. But I would always take them to shade because it's comfortable, it's a nice break from the heat, and you know, parks and everything look nice. But the problem is the light coming through the trees is always going to pick up that color, and it's always green. And so what do you do to compensate for green? Well, in post-production, you start bumping up the magentas, and then all of a sudden skin tones and everything else look really weird, or the ambient light behind the couple starts looking really pink. And so the best way to tackle that is to introduce clean white light on your subject, and then you don't notice the color casts in the background quite as much as you do on the dress and on people. So that's where the larger softboxes come into play, because you're able to block light hitting them and then introduce kind of wider, softer light so it looks more natural. I wanted to do an example. This is a technique that I use a lot too, where you have hard light hitting somebody and it's
Mhm.
not quite in the right place. You can actually put a softbox or reflector dish in front of the sun, almost like an eclipse, and you can block the hard light hitting your subject, which will cast a shadow on them. But then
Mhm.
when your strobe fires, you're introducing nice, clean light in the direction that you need it. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get to do that example in this video, but it's kind of the same idea. You're blocking the light that looks bad on your subject, and then when you fire the flash with that device that you're blocking the sun with, you're introducing nice clean light. And so I hope that that's what showed well in this video. The greenery wasn't as heavy as it might be in certain situations, but um, you know, you can kind of put your light in a weird position and block that light and introduce nice clean light.
Yeah, I know for anyone who wants to see kind of an example of that, a few weeks ago, I did a video where we were just using a lot of collapsible reflectors to shape the light, tried to use no flash at all. And we used a translucent to diffuse out I mean, we shot at like noon or like 1 in the afternoon. So we used a lucent to block it out. There's greenery behind. And even with the reflector bouncing light back up, you can see there's no green cast in it. So, yes, but controlling the light, you can do a lot of stuff even with color casts.
I want to say too, one thing that's really important as a wedding photographer is being on location and like I said, taking these pictures with natural light. That's probably where you're going to start, because you're going to see where does the light fall before I might even consider adding flash. At least that's the way that I work. Is that once you take that picture, you got to look at the back of the camera and then zoom in, and you have to start recognizing, ooh, there's green tint being cast up from the grass or coming down through the trees. And it will save you so much time if you can recognize that on location and then deal with it out in the field versus getting home and thinking you nailed that shoot. And then all of a sudden you're like, man, I've got to start selecting bodies and subjects and pulling the green out. And you have this Lightroom post production that you have to do. So the quicker that you can get at recognizing problems out on location, the quicker it's going to be to get the images edited later in post.
Uh, so I hope I'm not butchering the name, but Marius is who had that original question. He had a follow-up question, which is actually something I was wondering too. Can you compensate for the green light from above, or like you were saying, maybe with grass from below, with the flash from the front or the side? Or what would you do to mitigate it?
I think like it's just blocking the reflection. Obviously, blocking green from the grass is near impossible. I don't know that I've ever even attempted to do that. But it comes down to your lighting ratios. If you can just overpower that fill light, which is essentially what it is, if you can overpower that fill light, I don't know technically, maybe like one stop, 1.5 stops,
Mhm.
the clean light that you're introducing is going to become so much more prevalent that the color cast light that you see is not going to be as big of a deal. You definitely have this in receptions where I kind of live and die by bounce flash off the camera. I am
Mhm.
bouncing flash into white walls, inevitably that light is going to hit something that's got a color cast. But as long as the majority of the light hitting your subject is clean light, it kind of takes care of those little color casts that you have. Now, obviously, if you bounce light into a wood cedar wall, you're going to have all kinds of problems there. So a whole different technique you got to learn is the bounce flash technique. But the same thing applies with, any kind of lighting that you're doing.
Yeah, and I think something too that would help with that is the proximity of your subject from the thing that's casting the color. So if you can keep the distance, so if grass is what you're worried about and your subject is standing, then with the light relatively close, you're not going to have to worry too much about that light hitting the grass and then coming back up. But if you had the same subject laying on the ground, the chances that could cast back up are much simpler. So you just have to kind of think about how much light is getting to the thing that could cast the color, and don't do that, or find some way of blocking that if you can. So
yeah,
cool. Let's see if we have any other questions before we roll to the third one. Cool. It's just someone wanting a 3-foot click octa for wedding stuff. Let's see. Did I miss anything? Oh, and Tina was asking if you ever use parabolic light modifiers.
I've used that a few times in the studio, but never out on location. The light is pretty cool, but they're so big, and then they're like umbrellas, which I mentioned earlier. I would try to avoid umbrellas at all costs because the wind catches them. People ask, why do you use a big softbox when surely the wind messes with that? But I find that because it's all enclosed, it's really not that bad compared to like an umbrella. And so many times I would bring a small softbox out to the beach in a windy environment. And as long as I can crank the lighting down and everything on some kind of stick to where my assistant can face it in the direction it needs to go without it pivoting, if he could just battle that one little element, the softbox would work great. Whereas a parabolic reflector or some kind of deep umbrella, I mean, the wind is just going to have its day with it. So, no, I mean, if you were shooting super high end weddings and you got like a celebrity client who, let's just say Kim Kardashian or something, where every image is so glamorized, or you're shooting the royal family, maybe in some weird situation like that, sure, bring out the parabolic, set it up in their house, and get some really crazy looking images. But for normal wedding photography, I've never used that on location.
Yeah, I went and just so people would also know too, even with that example. So I'm not going to say the names because I'm just not going to. But I was a part of a celebrity wedding in Savannah actually a few months ago, and honestly, we didn't use anything like that. Like a lot of the times, we had the A2 with click soft boxes. It was I would say that it's just like any other wedding. You're running around, you're making things happen with as little stuff as you can because you're on a super tight time crunch. So, yeah, I mean, I would even say unless like and some of the shots were actually on the cover of like Vogue and stuff like that. So even with something at that level, we still weren't using any type of big, huge thing. Like we were just working with what we could move fast with.
I think as photographers, we like to overthink everything. We like to think, because I own this and it's a super expensive whatever, I need to use it, and how can I bring it along? And I need to do a 2 or 3 light setup, and we're about to show you a 2 light setup, which I do pretty common. But you start getting into 3 lights and just making like, it's easy as photographers to think I need to do all this extravagant stuff, but keep it simple, keep it reliable. That's another thing with flashes is like I love to take multiple flashes. So if I'm going to use this A2, I'm going to make sure I have at least 2, if not 3 of these that I carry with me, because I'm always ready for something to go wrong or get broken or get left behind, and I don't have it with me or my assistant's using it. And so the more complex you start making this stuff, if you rely on a parabolic reflector, you need 2 of those, because what happens if it gets broken, and what happens if the light doesn't work and you need a different type of pack to use that? Like, it just becomes so complicated that unless you're shooting, a 3-day Indian wedding and you have time to like set something up beforehand and you just want to challenge yourself and do it, I would recommend boiling it all down to 2 or 3 pieces of gear that you use every single time, and it gives you the most bang for the buck with those 2 or 3 things, and just leave all the other studio gear at home. Like, it's just too much to take.
Yeah, 100%. And then one question, and then we're going to roll with the third video. We've got, what about a situation where you don't have a bigger softbox? How can you still achieve the same result?
Outside, there's really not a whole lot you can do. I mean, you can always bring the softbox closer, but at some point, you can't make a 3-foot softbox look softer, especially like a group setting. If you're able to, bounce flash is huge. And I think the last video I did with you guys was all about using bounce flash in the studio to get really clean looking lighting. Bounce flash is incredibly useful indoors. I mean, if I'm shooting, all these pictures are outside, but if I'm shooting any kind of portrait indoors and I have the chance to bounce a light off a wall or ceiling, most of the time, that's actually the light modifier I go to, is I just bounce off the wall. It looks super large and soft. It looks incredibly natural, and it's the easiest thing possible. So, if you have some kind of reflector, you're talking about using a reflector that pops out to block out hard light. Sometimes you can have an assistant hold a translucent or white reflector off to the side and bounce your flash into that. But typically, I like to have my light a little higher than people's heads. And a reflector is often, kind of waist level. And so it starts to look like hard side lighting or soft side lighting. So I don't know. There's a few things you can do. Bounce off of a wall outside, although that's going to kill a lot of the power that you have. So you need a really powerful strobe, or it needs to be nighttime to do it. Or maybe you could bounce off of some kind of reflector that's larger than the softbox that you have. But again, I try to avoid anything complicated. So if I feel like I need softer light and I don't have anything to do that with, I don't try to come up with some clever way to do that. I just go back to, well, what can I do? What will work every time? And most of the time, my clients, they don't know that I wanted to use a huge octabox. They don't know. They don't know lighting. And so I'll just come up with a different setup that looks great for that situation.
It's good. It's good advice. Someone asked, what's your favorite portable light stand? And you're going to talk about that a little bit in the next video. But I'm sorry,
I won't share that one. But I have,
you might be disappointed. You might be
I got
disappointed.
a bunch of light stands back here. This one, I don't even know. Like, everybody and their brother makes this thing that just collapses.
Yeah,
this is like the smallest light stand you can have, and the disadvantage is it doesn't go real tall, and it's also not super sturdy. But I don't even know who to tell you what to link to. But everyone's seen these light stands, right? I love these. That's probably my go-to for just doing a quick portrait. And then I love these by Manfrotto. This is the 420B. And it has this head on it that allows it to boom.
That's
so
nice.
I don't necessarily boom stuff at weddings, but because it can boom, it can get really tall. And then here in the studio, I mean, I have a setup over here where I'm booming lights all the time. So these are my 2 light stands. This one's just kind of a pain to travel with, especially if you have to fly, because you definitely need a grip bag, because this is just long enough. This is probably like 3.5 feet. It's just long enough to not fit into most bags that you have.
Yeah, my favorite portable stand is by Matthews. It's a silly name. It's called Murph, MERF.
Okay.
But it folds up just like that one the first one that you showed. So it kind of folds up. It's not it's maybe 8 foot, maybe 9 foot. It's not bad, but it's a good little stand whenever you need. And the nice thing is you can actually point the legs down a little bit more and get a little more height out of it. So.
Yeah, having height on location, you saw in the very first video that I just released yesterday on Fstoppers, like sometimes your assistant is going to be lower than where the couple is standing, and you just always want to have enough height, but that's always the trade-off, is the stands become so big to get the height. So you really want to find that perfect light stand and buy 2 or 3 of them, and just keep those with your wedding gear, especially if you shoot multiple types of photography. Have the wedding gear set up, and you're like, that stand is, it goes 8, 9, 10 feet. And it's manageable. So, and then I leave a lot of this stuff here in the studio to where, it can be bigger and bulkier and heavier. And I don't take that on location.
Cool. We have a couple more questions, but we'll save them for after the end of the next video. And so we're going to roll that right now. Here we go.
This is kind of that paparazzi shot where it's hard light close to the camera, but we're able to get all of the lights in the background, maybe even a little camera motion. In order to make the colors look the way that I want, I'm going to add a half CTO to really warm up my key light. I'm going to go ahead and put a grid on here. This is the Click Grid 20 degree. That's just going to keep the light really on our subject. And then I might add another CTO gel on a second light and put that behind our subject to kind of add some light from the back, but I'm not gonna really know until I get out there and shoot this. Now, I wish I could tell you where to get this little light stand. I have never found it after I bought it, but it's essentially a plate with the smallest little stand. And what I love about this is I can take it apart like this and keep it in my bags. It takes up no space, but it's perfect for when you need to do a 2-light setup or you want some light from behind and you don't have an assistant to help out. You can just mount this thing and hide it behind somebody. Look how easy that is. Somebody needs to make this again because I've never been able to find this after I bought it. All right, so as you can see, the sun has set significantly. It's much darker. We're kind of in the blue hour, and I thought it would be great to do a shot in the streets of Old San Juan. And for the styling of the light here, I'm going for kind of a glamour image where I have really hard light fairly close to the camera, but then I can also use a second light to backlight these incredible cobblestone streets. We also have the lights of the town coming on, which are gonna kind of blend everything together. Sometimes when you have one backlight and you're in the middle of nowhere, it screams 2-light flash setup. But if you have some other ambient lights that you can bleed into your background, it kind of makes the whole image look a little bit more cohesive. As I mentioned earlier, we are using a grid and a half CTO on the main light. That's gonna give a little bit of warmth to our subject. The second light is about 30 feet in the background. It's on that little handy stand that I have. And I've put a full CTO on that so the light's a little bit warmer. And with the blue light from the sky, the city lights in the background, and then the kicker light in the background, we can kind of blend all of those together so that it looks really authentic. And then with our key light directly over the camera with the grid and the CTO gel, it's gonna just light her and make it look kind of like a old snapshot where you have the on-camera flash and it looks a little more fashion friendly. So let me show you what this looks like with the key light only, and then I'm gonna turn on the backlight so you can see how big of a difference this makes. So that looks really nice, very hard light, lighting up her whole dress. It's very bright and vibrant. Let's go ahead and turn on our backlight, which is about 30 feet away. And now you can see it's illuminating a lot of the street. Because I have it so far back, it's lighting up most of the street, and blending in these little lanterns on the side, I think is gonna make this effect look kind of more realistic than it would if it was just total darkness back there. So to get this shot, it's a little bit of a juggling act between the ambient light, your key light, your backlight, and then of course, as the sun is setting, you're gonna be changing your exposures even more. I think as it gets later in the night, you're gonna be able to drag your shutter, let more of the street lights come in, and it's actually gonna look better. So if you can time this perfectly, the payoff is gonna be huge. All right, and look right here. We also have to avoid people in the background. All right, so we're losing our daylight. It's starting to get dark out here. The wind's coming in. It might start raining, but I think we're gonna walk away with some incredible shots. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this small tutorial and you can take some of these lighting tips and use them in your own photography.
I think that was pretty awesome. Really,
Yep.
a really simple setup too.
Yeah, and like I said, I would use this setup all the time. I have way more complicated setups, especially with speed lights and having other photographers involved in everything. Hopefully I'm still here. I think my power is flickering in and out.
I did see it flicker for a second, but you're still good.
Here in Puerto Rico, we lose power like every day for some amount of time. And so everything's on battery backup. And so as long as the internet doesn't go out, I can still do things live with battery. But yeah, so one setup that I'll do a lot with this is the departure shot. So when the bride and groom are coming out of the venue, I've had it to where they have bubbles, they have sparklers, they throw confetti. Like there's probably leave the venue. And if you can put a light on a stand, maybe not as low as what I was doing in this shot, but using a backlight to illuminate them departing, I would do that almost every chance I had. So super easy. And then with the Pro Photo gear, with the remote and everything, you can control stuff. You don't have to run all the way back there and adjust it and think, oh my gosh, they're coming out in 2 seconds. It's so easy. You could even put it in TTL and have it kind of meter itself. So I really like this setup, and in this case, having the cobblestones backlit and warming the gel up or warming the light up with the gel to kind of match the temperature of the street really helps create that look.
Yeah, and there's a lot of texture in the scene too. So using the hard light to kind of uh, I emphasize. That's what I was looking for. To emphasize that texture is really nice as well.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a setup you always would use hard light with. I mean, to hide some kind of softbox or something. Like maybe you could get a light up behind them and firing down that's out of frame, but
Mhm.
I always like to have my light as small as possible, and that's why this setup right here is so good. Is you can hide this behind people so easily. When you get larger lights and bigger stands, you get the legs showing and everything. Um, and did I hear you found? Did you find this light stand?
I was I was super curious while the video was rolling, and I just Googled it really fast and scrolled through a couple of like shopping pictures, and it popped up. It's by Smith Victor.
Okay. Yeah, I don't even. Yeah, it says SV on this, so that's exactly the stand. Wow. I've had this thing for like 15 years, and for a long time, I feel like they did not make this anymore. And
So
so I don't even.
if anyone wants that small stand, it's a Smith Victor tabletop stand, is what they call it.
I
So
use it on location all the time. You throw a sandbag right here on the bottom, and it's got you can't mount anything too big. Although I just took a photo of a guitar that I put on our channel, and I was using this low with a strip box, a 1x3, and as long as you put a sandbag on the bottom of this, it will. It's pretty sturdy.
it's pretty nice too how small it folds down. So yeah, for all the stuff that you're talking about, like keeping something low as a kicker, it looks like a great stand for it.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see what we have question wise. Oh, here's Jeff from earlier. He was wondering how often you would use the OCF, such as like an A1X or an A10, or do you prefer the A2s?
I really like the A2s because they're so small. Um, I mean the speed light, you got to use that, right? That's the A. Is it the A10
A10
now?
right now, yeah.
Yeah. So the speed light. I mean, I kind of live and die with a speed light on camera, and I know for any other genre of photography, on camera flash is like the enemy. And I would never point it forward. I'm always bouncing it somewhere behind me or off in a ceiling. But I always want that on me unless I'm out, on a golf course and shooting the bridal portraits. I would never use it there. But so the A series, I feel like you gotta have that. You gotta have that for the ceremony, for the reception, for getting ready shots. I mean, I don't set up any of these other studio type lights. Very rarely would I set that up. Sometimes I'll light a corner of the room the girls are getting ready in, but for the most part, I want it portable. I want to be able to move that head. So the A series is definitely the go-to there. And
Mhm.
then, I also have the B10s, which I love. They're a little bit bigger. So I guess it just depends what I'm doing. If I'm doing a full wedding and I have all the cases and I have the assistant and I maybe have the second shooter, I will probably take the B10s with me just because they're a
Mhm.
little bit more powerful and, I have more of them. If I'm just doing a session, if I'm going to go do a bridal session or an engagement session, or, I just need something lightweight that we're going to throw in a golf cart because we got to go, 5 minutes away to do some pictures real quick, you know, the A2s are great for that. So, again, I like to keep things simple and not have too many setups. I also have the D lights, but I just try to have like one or two systems, and I want everything to work with itself. And that's what's great about this. This is what do you call this? The click adapter 2.
Mhm.
This allows this tiny little light here, the A2, to fit in, which I kind of leave this permanently set up like this for the most part. And then it allows me to use almost every reflector that I own already on this setup, because the last thing I want are different types of modifiers and different types of speed rings. And I'm having to like tell my assistant to grab that one or grab this one. I like the same camera. I like all the same lenses. I like the same lighting setup, the same flash triggers. I want it all to be as consistent as possible. I don't even like hiring other photographers who shoot on a different camera system, because if I happen to say, hey, I need that telephoto lens, and all of a sudden they're shooting on a Fuji or a Canon, there's nothing wrong with those cameras, but I don't know them nearly as well as I know the Nikon system, at least for shooting weddings. So um, for me, again, keep it simple and have everything talk to each other. I want the same ecosystem, and so that's the way that I would recommend handling it, is just have it to where if anything goes wrong, you have backups that all, work well with each other.
Good point. Someone was asking, what is your lighting technique for group photos?
So group photos. So you kind of have two different situations. You have more traditional photos where people get married in a church and they want all the pictures done, in front of the altar and on the, everyone lined up. And for that, I usually use one or two really powerful lights bouncing into the ceiling. And if the ceiling is made of wood or the ceiling is 50 feet up and it's just not practical to bounce off of it, I will then set up the largest softbox that I bring with me. And normally I will know this beforehand. I will know that there's going to be group photos in the church. And if that happens, I'm going to bring a larger, 4 foot, what is this one I have here? 3 by 4 foot softbox. Maybe I bring two. And in that case, I'm going to put two light stands up, either on one side to give directionality or maybe on both sides, and just fire the whole couple with the whole wedding party and family photos with soft light.
And I
Ideally, I
think,
would just bounce off the ceiling and not deal
yeah,
with soft boxes.
yeah.
If we're shooting outside, that's the other obvious situation. I almost always try to do natural light. I don't try to fight getting f8 in a bright sunny day and having to struggle with my power settings on my strobes and trying to light a group with hard light and trying to soft. It's just way too much effort. And so I will try to put the sun behind them and let kind of the open shade light the couple and kind of expose for the rim lighting caused by the sun. Or I will put them in an entirely shaded area and try to just expose naturally. And if we get some color casts and that sort of stuff, I just deal with that in post. But I just found it to be extremely difficult to light large groups outside with flash. And if you use hard light, sometimes you're going to get the people in the middle, they're going to be lit perfectly, but the people on the outside aren't lit evenly, or you're going to start getting those hard shadows on people that don't look great. And so my suggestion is, if you can use natural light for large groups outside, that's my go-to. If you're shooting indoors, bounce the light off the wall or the ceiling. And if you have to, use a really big softbox to, throw light towards the whole couple, the whole party.
Yeah, I think really from the sounds of kind of everything we've been talking about, for the most part, and when it comes to like lighting for wedding photography, keeping it simple and doing everything you can to mitigate any variables, to just make sure that you are thinking about, or like ask the right questions, think about stuff, but keep it simple.
That's, everyone says I would never photograph a wedding because it's too stressful. And I've just always felt like if you hire good clients and you ask the right questions and you get enough experience and you prepare and think through things and bring backup gear. I mean, I would bring a whole Pelican case full of, D1s just in case something broke. I have it there, or in case a situation comes up where, oh my gosh, we're shooting in a barn and I can't bounce flash at all. I need to plug in a strobe on a stand and put a bunch of sandbags down on it. I would bring all of that stuff just in case, because the last thing that I want is to wind up in any situation throughout an 8-hour day and wish that I had something with me. Now, obviously, if you're flying and traveling, like, you can't bring everything, but I would bring a lot of stuff knowing that there's a 90% chance it just stays in my car, but it's there if I need it. And so I'm saying keep it simple, but you also need a few things just in case you need more power or you need refresh cycles faster because you're shooting the reception. So there are situations like that, but a lot of it is meeting with your clients beforehand, doing a consultation call a day or two before the wedding, and just confirming everything is in place. And time, you can't overshadow experience, but shoot a couple, assist a bunch of photographers, go out and just assist 10 or 20 weddings, and you'll have a really good idea of pretty much anything that can be thrown your way.
Gotcha. I think we have one final question, and then it's a wrap. So Marius was also wondering, in churches, when you're using like a 3x4, how do you control the light in the background? Often it gets dark, a big fall off towards the back, especially I guess if you're doing like groups and there's rows of people, it can fall off towards the back.
Yeah, the trick with that, again, if you can bounce off the ceiling, that's the easiest because the light's so far away that it illuminates everything evenly. But if you think about that, the reason it's lighting everything evenly is because the light's so far away. So if you have to use a softbox, do not fall into the trap of putting the softbox in that first row and trying to have it really close. Like I would put it as far back as possible. Maybe that's like 5 to 10 feet behind me. And I always like to go as far back as I can before the pews start to show up in the foreground. I don't like to be really close to everybody and shoot wide angle. I like to step back and zoom in as much as I can. And when you do that, you also want the lights a little bit further away. So it just depends on the size of the wedding party too. If you have a couple and they don't have many family members, or one side is larger and the other side's really small, or the wedding party itself, it's 1 or 2 bridesmaids and it's not really a big deal, you can condense everything down kind of like a headshot, and you can say, all right, we're just going to be shooting this small area. But if you have a 10 people on each side, and you have 20 people up there, you're going to have to pull everything back and try to, fire the light further away so that you're getting light both on the background and on your subject. And if you're not getting much light on the background, you can also play with your shutter a lot. There's many cases where there's lights, there's windows that's letting light in behind. And if you just drag the shutter slow enough to where you can still take the picture without it being blurry, you can start to bleed some of the natural light in. It's kind of case by case scenario, but always pull the lights further back at the expense of losing power and at the expense of the light becoming a little harder. But sometimes that's all you can do.
Yeah. So if you don't know, Marius, there's something called the inverse square law. And without getting super technical, the rule is simple. The more you back the light off, the slower it falls off. So like what Patrick's saying, get the light back further and it'll give you more coverage towards the back of your grouping of people.
Throw up the picture of the strip box image that was on the video. This is a good example where if you look at this photo,
come on,
there is a lot of deep shadow in this. Like the light is just off frame to the left. It's really close to the flowers and it's incredibly soft. I mean, look at the white flowers. There's a lot of fill. Her face is super soft, but at the expense of soft light, you also have her cheek on the right side of the frame is going really dark. And so sometimes it's hard to imagine that light that's close and soft would also produce dark shadows, but they are. Look at the tree on the right side of the image. I mean, it's very shaded. So, you're going to get shadows and you're going to get highlights in different ways, but with the softer light, the transition is going to be soft, so you don't get like hard edges, but you also do introduce a lot more shade and dark shadows than you would naturally think. So pulling the light further away is going to open up those shadows, but it's going to make the transition harder. So there's a balance there. I think, sometimes with wedding photography, especially big group photos, it's just like, what do you have to do to get the shot? And everyone likes to believe that the family photos are, super, super important. But in many cases, they're just there for the album. Like I know very few people that print the whole wedding party together and print that image large and put it in their house. They probably print it small and put it in a frame somewhere, and you have to like go up close and try to see that everyone was there. But it's usually the couple's shot of them dancing, their first dance, or the portraits that you take out on location, or maybe the kiss at the altar. There's a handful of photos that realistically are going to be printed large, where that amount of detail is going to go in, and they're going to say, oh, it's soft light or hard light. So the point I'm trying to make is when you have to shoot a large group, many cases, you just do what you got to do to make the exposure right. And you just kind of leave it at that. You're prepared as much as you can be, but you don't overthink it. And if the lights are, all the way back and you have to take the reflector, the softbox off and just use hard light, just get that position in a way where it's going to look as nice as it possibly can and give you the correct exposure. But, you can kind of drive yourself crazy with group shots.
Yeah. And I think too, like what you were talking about with the image that we were showing just a second ago, you're talking about backing it up but you have to forego some of the softness. Sometimes I think we as photographers, like we said earlier, overthink stuff and we're like, oh, it's not perfect. And it's never going to be perfect. It's okay if the shadow gets a little bit harder. Okay. Just think of what it is that you need to achieve. And I think the tough thing is no one wants to give up anything to get something. And you always kind of have to give something up. And so just be okay with what you have to give up in order to achieve your goal. So,
Well said.
someone said, do you use the B1X at all in studio or on location?
Yeah. I mean, I have one right back there, I believe. Yeah, I mean, I love that light too. I don't know all the details. Is it like a one stop more powerful? And I think it's got a more powerful modeling lamp,
It's
maybe.
a little more powerful than a B10, but the B10X or the B10 Plus, the 500 watt, they're about the same. I would honestly argue that the B10 gives a touch more output, but I think it's because the reflector's a little more pointed in, not by much, but I think it's like the B1 is like 77 degrees and the B10 is like 68. So
Okay.
not a huge difference, but I think that's what the makeup and output is. But yeah, so if you have a B10 Plus, you're probably fine not worrying about a B1X. The B1X is really for people who need to be able to plug in a trigger or something like that. Like if you have backup triggers, if something happened to your
Oh,
connect.
the B1. Okay. Yeah, no,
B1.
I do not. I do not use that system.
Yeah, as
I misunderstood.
as
What
the
was that?
B, yeah, I think as the B10s have come out and the technology is way better. I think a lot of people, unless you absolutely need to be able to change out the glass plate, or you need to be able to plug in a PC cable or some other triggering system, uh, the B10 is just the B10 Plus is a phenomenal light.
Yeah, that's primarily what I use is the B10 and then the A2 now.
Let's see, just double checking that we haven't missed anything. One other person was asking, what ISO do you use in like a formal church situation? Is it just variable?
Whatever it takes to get the
Mhm.
shot.
Yeah.
I am not a. I mean, here's the thing. When I started shooting weddings, my first camera was the Nikon D200, and that was groundbreaking. Right? It was like the most professional camera ever to come out. That was less than $2,000 or around $2,000. And I remember the ISO on that camera. If you went above, if you used ISO 800 with really good flash, bounced into the ceiling, it was good. If you went above 800, even with flash, it looked awful. And so now today's cameras, ISO 3200 looks like ISO 400 back then. So, if you're just getting into photography, it's very easy to get the newest camera and to bump up the ISO to 6400 or beyond and say, oh, this looks so grainy. But I guarantee you, it looks so incredible compared to what everyone else has done for the last 50 years, the last 30 years with digital photography, that I do not even consider it at all. I will crank that ISO up all the way. And you could shoot natural light in churches, which I never would have done because I just couldn't go up that high. But if you can there's something with adding clean strobe light to a high ISO image that negates so much of the noise. And then if you ever print that image on a poster or an album, I mean, I actually want to make a video about this, how little noise shows up in a print. It's almost like it's weird. You look at it on a screen and you think like this is unusable. And then you print that image and it looks incredible. So I do not worry about ISO at all. If I had to say something like ISO 800 to 1600 is where I would typically live, but no, it's not a big deal to me at all.
Cool. So I'm going to throw the QR code back up there. I took it down for a minute because it kept flashing up this thing about people who scanned it. It was a little distracting, but I'm going to throw the QR code back up there for for anyone to scan right now. So that is the first three lighting setups. So this is part one of what we went over today over on the Fstoppers YouTube page. You can go check that out and see the other images we made. Let me make sure that we don't have any other questions. I know, let's see, Brad McMillan said for big group shots, he likes to use 7-foot umbrellas. So I think it really, at the end of the day, it's just what tools work best for you. And again, keeping it simple and trying to mitigate variables.
7-foot umbrella. That's a big umbrella.
It's a big boy. It's a big boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But cool. Patrick, we really, really appreciate it, man. This is just like last time. I think this time, a lot of really good information. I think the questions people had were phenomenal, and we really appreciate you coming and hanging out with us.
Yeah, and it's good to talk about something that I've done. I think a lot of people know me with Fstoppers and some of the quirky photo shoots we do and the portraits and, the shoot offs and all that kind of stuff. But, I started off with photography professionally, at least getting paid as a wedding photographer, and I did that for at least 10 years. I don't shoot as many weddings now, unless something really fun shows up. But wedding photography, I feel like it's desirable. It's always needed. It can be as fun or as miserable as you make it. And so when I first got into it, I did not want to shoot weddings at all until I realized, these actually are fun and you can make a lot of money and you get to be more creative than ever. I was talking earlier about people feeling like weddings are really stressful. I think the most stressful shoots I've ever been a part of is when there's a whole team and a creative director and an agency, and they're looking over your shoulders, and it's time for you to perform and to pull off something that you're not quite sure exactly what they want, and they're redirecting every little minute and micromanaging. That to me is way more stressful than when you're 2 or 3 years into a wedding career and you kind of know what to expect from every situation, and you can ease the bride and you can produce the best pictures of her favorite day ever. Like, I would take that almost every time over the big, commercial shoot that's so glamorized in our industry. So if you're looking to get into wedding photography, again, just assist as many people as you can. You'll get paid to do it and you'll learn a ton of stuff. And I hope throughout this whole video, people get the idea that you can really do whatever you want lighting wise, but then find your style, keep it simple, and make it repeatable over and over again. And don't complicate things too much.
Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Yeah, it was good seeing you and good being a part of this video.
Thanks, man. All right, everybody. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. This will be available for replay if you want to go back and scan through some stuff. Again, hit that QR code so you can go watch the first 3 episodes on the Fstoppers YouTube page. And with that being said, have an awesome rest of your week, and we'll see you next time on Geared Up.